You're listening to the Everything Jewish 10 Minutes at a Time podcast, where you'll learn about every Jewish topic imaginable in about 10 minutes. Before we begin, my usual disclaimer. My Hebrew pronunciation is about as accurate as me trying to read text messages while walking into a revolving door. Sometimes I nail it, sometimes I create a brand new dialect, so bear with me. Today's topic is the Eruv. If you've ever walked through a Jewish neighborhood and noticed what looks like fishing wire strung between telephone poles, congratulations, you've already seen one. The Eruv is a fascinating mix of religious law, city planning, and community cooperation. It's both deeply ancient and hilariously modern, like combining a Torah scroll with Google Maps. And yes, Eruvim, that's the plural, have even made cameo appearances in pop culture, so stick around for that. Let's dive in and untangle this very Jewish, very practical, and surprisingly relatable concept that answers the burning question: how do you make carrying a bag of goldfish crackers on Shabbat spiritually legal? At its heart, the Eruv solves a specific Shabbat problem. Jewish law from the Torah, Exodus 16, verse 29, Jeremiah 17, 21-22, and elaborated in the Talmud, prohibits carrying items from a private domain, like your house, to a public domain, like the street, on Shabbat. Imagine you live in a nice apartment and want to wheel your baby stroller to synagogue. It's technically forbidden. Same with carrying your house keys or your much-needed latte if you're pretending coffee is Shabbat approved. To fix this, rabbis developed the concept of an Eruv, which symbolically turns a large area, often an entire neighborhood, into one big private domain. This way, carrying becomes permissible. It's like using a giant merge account feature on a streaming service. Suddenly, multiple homes, streets, and parks are bundled into one symbolic household, and everyone shares the login. The Eruv is less about bending rules and more about preserving Shabbat joy. You can bring your kids, your food, and your sanity with you. Otherwise, Shabbat could feel like house arrest with excellent meals. So, how does it work practically? The Eruv creates a symbolic boundary, often marked by wires strung between poles, forming a door frame effect called Surat HaPetach, literally the form of a doorway. 2 poles and a wire count as a doorway in halachic terms. String enough of those together, and suddenly your entire neighborhood looks like one massive connected house. Some Eruvim rely on natural boundaries, rivers, walls, or fences. But in modern cities, telephone and utility poles make life easier. Municipal governments often cooperate, giving rabbis permission to use existing infrastructure. Building an Eruv isn't just religious engineering. It's also legal, political, and occasionally dramatic. Think of it like planning a giant theme park where every boundary matters, except instead of roller coasters, you're managing baby strollers and kugel trays. Once constructed, the Eruv requires constant maintenance. Volunteers or hired inspectors check it weekly. One fallen wire or broken pole and the whole system collapses. Suddenly, you can't carry, and the community gets emergency WhatsApp alerts like, "Eruv down! Don't risk carrying that diaper bag!" The Eruv isn't without controversy. Some Jews, especially stricter interpretations within Haredi communities, don't accept certain city Eruvim as valid. They argue the wires don't create a true halachic boundary. Others oppose Eruvim because they feel they lessen the Shabbat experience, turning it into business as usual. In Israel, fights have broken out over who maintains control of certain Eruvim. In American suburbs, some homeowners associations and city councils have tried to block Eruv construction, calling the wires ugly or intrusive. Court battles have erupted, usually settled by First Amendment religious freedom protections. It's remarkable. The same law that lets you wear a giant foam Statue of Liberty costume in public also protects the right to string invisible wires for Shabbat. To many Jews, the Eruv symbolizes inclusion. Parents can bring kids to synagogue, families can picnic in the park, and the elderly can move about without hardship. To opponents, it's either halachically flimsy or aesthetically weird. Either way, it sparks debates as passionate as whether pineapple belongs on pizza. Culturally, Eruvim have even made their way into TV and movies. The most famous example is Curb Your Enthusiasm. In one episode, Larry David gets caught up in neighborhood drama over an Eruv. He treats it with his trademark confusion and sarcasm, turning a deeply religious concept into sitcom material. The episode showed millions of viewers that Eruvim exist, even if most just thought, wait, people fight over fishing wire? There's also a documentary called The Invisible Strings that explains how Eruvim quietly shaped Jewish life in cities like Manhattan. Newspapers from the New York Times to local town gazettes regularly run stories with headlines like, Eruv debate divides suburb, making it sound like the Eruv is some political scandal instead of a wire that lets parents carry snacks. These pop culture references matter. They make something obscure part of mainstream awareness. It's like when bagels went from Jewish deli specialty to freezer aisle staple. The Eruv has stepped onto the cultural stage, even if audiences don't always get the full picture. Let's zoom out. Beyond wires and poles, the Eruv is about balance between law and life, tradition and adaptation. Shabbat is meant to be a day of rest, but without an Eruv, that rest can turn into rigidity. Imagine being unable to push a wheelchair to synagogue or carry water bottles to the park. That's why the rabbis designed the Eruv, not to break Shabbat, but to protect its spirit. Some scholars compare it to software patches. Halacha is the operating system, and Eruvim are updates fixing bugs while keeping the system intact. Others see it as community building. The act of creating an Eruv requires collective cooperation, fundraising, and maintenance. It turns neighbors into literal co-tenants of one big symbolic home. If you're inside the Eruv, you're part of the household. It's a subtle but powerful reminder that Jewish life is communal. You're not just living on your block, you're spiritually sharing space with everyone around you. That's a pretty profound outcome from something as simple as string and poles. Historically, Eruvim go back nearly 2,000 years. The Talmud devotes an entire tractate, Eruvin, to discussing boundaries, doorframes, and symbolic enclosures. If you've ever tried reading Eruvin, you know it's like advanced Sudoku, diagrams, hypotheticals, and debates that would make even the nerdiest city planner sweat. Medieval authorities like Rashi and Maimonides weighed in on how to apply these laws in walled cities, villages, and eventually sprawling towns. When Jews arrived in America, they brought the concept with them, though early immigrant communities often lacked the resources or political clout to build Eruvim. The first U.S. Eruv is generally credited to St. Louis in the early 20th century, with New York City following later. Today, Manhattan boasts one of the largest Eruvim in the world, stretching across multiple boroughs. Weekly inspections are no small feat. It's like monitoring the world's weirdest spiderweb. The continuity from Talmudic villages to modern megacities shows how halacha adapts while staying rooted. An Eruv may look like simple wire, but it carries centuries of legal thought and communal effort. Practically, living inside an Eruv can feel seamless. You might not even notice it. But step outside, and suddenly life feels different. Observant Jews carefully check if their address is in or out. Real estate ads in Jewish neighborhoods sometimes brag, located within the Eruv, as if it's a luxury pool feature. Parents especially feel the difference. Inside, they can wheel strollers, carry diaper bags, and enjoy communal Shabbat meals outdoors. Outside, they're confined indoors unless they plan carefully. The Eruv doesn't just enable carrying, it enables community vibrancy. Families can gather in parks, elderly can walk with canes, friends can bring food to share. Without it, the Shabbat landscape shrinks. For those who rely on it, an Eruv isn't abstract law, it's tangible quality of life. It's like the difference between Wi-Fi and no Wi-Fi. You only realize how vital it is when you lose connection. And just like Wi-Fi, when the Eruv goes down, panic texts flood the group chats, reshaping everyone's weekend plans instantly. Of course, Eruvim raise interesting philosophical questions. What does it mean to redefine space? Can a string really turn public into private? Critics argue it's a legal fiction, a workaround that bends the rules. Supporters counter that Judaism has always used symbolic acts to infuse meaning. Think mezuzot on doorposts or wine sanctifying Shabbat. The Eruv is no different. It transforms mundane space into something spiritually charged. Some rabbis even emphasize that the act of setting up an Eruv highlights Shabbat's seriousness. It reminds us that carrying is normally prohibited, so the Eruv's presence is itself a weekly awareness tool. This tension between pragmatism and symbolism is classic Judaism. Make life livable, but never forget the sanctity behind the practice. In a way, the Eruv embodies the Jewish knack for creative resilience. When faced with challenges, whether exile, diaspora, or city zoning laws, Jews found a way to adapt without abandoning tradition. The Eruv isn't just about carrying, it's about carrying Judaism forward, one wire at a time. So next time you stroll through a Jewish neighborhood and see those almost invisible wires, you'll know you're looking at centuries of tradition wrapped around utility poles. And Eruv isn't flashy. It won't get its own Marvel spinoff, though Eruv Man would be hilarious. But it quietly transforms Jewish life. It turns a neighborhood into a community, law into livability, and restrictions into opportunities. Whether featured in Talmudic debates, sitcom episodes, or local zoning meetings, the Eruv shows the uniquely Jewish way of blending sacred law with everyday life. It's practical, symbolic, communal, and even a little quirky. And really, isn't that the essence of Judaism itself? Thanks for listening to Everything Jewish, 10 minutes at a time. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others, because whether it's festivals, foods, or fishing wire mysteries, there's always something to learn. And hey, if you see an Eruv, give it a nod. It may not notice, but the families inside it will sure appreciate the invisible strings tying everyone together.